So I bought this coloring book about a year ago. I really loved the artwork in here. I loved the line work. This is by Kirby Rosanes. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that name, but it's absolutely beautiful, and I have had every intention of working in here and coloring it, but I have been terrified that I am going to ruin it. So today I'm going to actually use this. I am going to pick out a piece in here and we are going to color it together. I do plan on using my alcohol markers in here, which means that it's going to bleed through to the other side because I did a quick little test in the back. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So I flipped through earlier and I did pick out a piece. I am going to do this one with the dragon on the mountain, and there's a tiny little temple right here. Hey there, this is VoiceOver Becky, and let me tell you what, when I got started on this, I was absolutely terrified that I was going to mess this thing up. I decided in order to make myself feel a little bit better, I was going to start off with really light versions of the colors that I thought I was going to use on everything. So that's why you see I kind of did this kind of pinky orangey color for the mountains, and then I picked this nice little light kind of blue-gray for the dragon, and I was really happy with how those colors were looking together. I thought it gave a lot of nice contrast, and I really liked that blue for the dragon because it's supposed to be kind of this thunder dragon. Which reminds me, each of the illustrations in this coloring book are intended to be representations of different myths from around the world, which is why it's called Mythic World. And in the back, there's a little blurb about each of the illustrations and talks about the myth that it is based on. This one in particular is based from the Himalayas in Mount Everest, and it is called a druk. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but D-R-U-K. And the little blurb in the back says, "The druk is a dragon primarily from Bhutanese mythology. It is said to live in the remote areas of Mount Everest. Its roar is attributed to the thunder that echoes across the mountains. Bhutan is known as Drukyul, or Land of the Thunder Dragon. When the Ralong Monastery was built, there was a violent storm, and the thunder was interpreted as the roar of the great dragon. The druk is a national symbol, featuring on Bhutan's national flag and in the national anthem. Bhutan's leaders are known as the Druk Gyalpo, the Dragon Kings." After I had read that, and of course after I had already given the dragon a base color, I decided to go look up the Bhutanese flag and see if there was a particular color that was associated with the dragon on that flag. And it's a white dragon, and it just has a kind of a silhouette of the dragon. So I don't think that I did anything necessarily wrong by picking that blue, but I figured the blue kind of made sense because a lot of the stuff around there is clouds, and that was kind of a cloudy blue color. Now, obviously, I didn't put any snow on top of the mountains, but in the illustration, it didn't really look like there was any snow on there. And I don't know if Mount Everest was really kind of this red color, but I thought it would work really well with the blue of the dragon and give some nice contrast. So I wanted my mountains to kind of have this reddy orange color that would be a nice contrast to that dragon. As I'm coloring in the mountains, I'm trying to be really careful about not going too dark too fast and to keep some of the areas really light, so I have some really nice contrast between the dark and the light. And I keep going in with that lightest color and going over things to just kind of blend it out a little bit so I don't have really harsh lines between the shadows. I want those to be kind of blurred a little bit. Overall, I'm really happy with how the mountains turned out, even though if you look at it, they are kind of almost like a fleshy color. I think it works really well for the illustration. At this point, I have finished coloring in all of the mountains, and you can just barely see under my finger that I put a little bit of yellow or kind of a gold color around the temple there because I wanted it to glow like it was struck by lightning. And I also pulled some of that yellow up into the mountain so you get some of that glow on the mountain. It's super subtle, but I think it does a really good job of making that glow look a lot realer. Right now I'm also going up into the dragon and using the same color that I used initially to put some more shadows in with the alcohol markers. If you layer the same color over top of itself, it will give you a darker color. At the very beginning, it looks a lot darker and then after it dries, it won't be quite as much darker. So you have to do a couple layers, or make sure that you go and get another slightly darker color if you want to get some of those shadow shapes in there. As I'm tossing shadows on there, I'm trying to keep in mind where I think my light source is coming from. And in general, I'm thinking about the light source coming from the upper right of the image. So we're getting a lot of shadows on the bottom and on the left. And I think it's working out pretty well. There's a couple of spots that I'm really happy with. In particular, some of the dragon's arms and legs. I really like how the shadows look on there. It gives a nice roundness to the shape. I also like the belly of the dragon and some of the spots where I left a little bit of a highlight on there. I think it really looks nice. I ended up having to go over some of the spots a couple of times in order to get it as dark as I wanted to. And I don't know if you can tell very well with the speed that this is, but for a lot of the shadows, I'm doing this flicking motion with the marker in order to give it a nice soft blend from the shadow to a non-shadowed area. And that works really well with these markers with the brush nib. At this point, I'm debating whether I want to color in the little balls that he's holding with a red, and I decided to just go ahead and go for it. Again, I wanted some colors that kind of contrasted like the dragon and would stand out well enough from the mountain. The mountain does have a lot of reds in there, but I picked this really red in order for it to stand out. After I put that in there, I'm putting some other color around there. I ended up kind of going in and doing a little bit more work to change the color a little bit, but overall they end up being red. But because that's the only place that I had red in the image, I was feeling like I needed to pull that red in somewhere else in order to tie it in. So at some point I go down into the, here we are. I'm going down into the temple and tossing some red down in there so that it makes sense that there's red in the balls and then there's red in the temple as well. At this point, I was really unhappy with the color I had selected for the mane of the dragon, so I was trying to throw some highlights on there with this Sharpie acrylic marker. I had stored the marker with the tip up, and as I was trying to put marker on there, it was coming out super watery and it wasn't really opaque at all. And so I ended up just deciding that it was looking really terrible, and I was just going to cover everything with the white Sharpie and start over on the hair. As I continued to color it in, the Sharpie ended up getting a little bit more opaque, and then it ended up covering up all of the lines in the mane. And so I ended up having to wait for that Sharpie to dry, color it in with the color that I wanted, and then go back in and put line work back onto the mane and hope to try and make the line work match what was there already, or at least match the feeling of the piece as it was. At this point, I am convinced that I have ruined this thing and that I'm going to put some color on there and it's going to look terrible, and I'm going to put the line work in there and it's going to be really obvious that I put the line work in and it doesn't match the piece at all. But I didn't really have much choice but to keep moving forward. Well, that's a lie. I had the choice to just stop and put it away and call it defeat and move on. But I figured since I'd already ruined the piece, there was no reason to not try something and see if I could salvage it. If I could, awesome. If I couldn't, well, I at least tried something and I learned a little something. So I pulled out my markers, tossed some color on there, pulled out my micron pen and started tossing some lines on there. I had to keep kind of scraping off the tip of the micron because it was scraping up a little bit of that Sharpie acrylic marker, but it ended up working out pretty well, and I think that the line work in the hair matches reasonably well to the piece and isn't super obvious that I ended up putting those in afterwards. At this point, the Sharpie acrylic marker is working pretty well, so I'm going in to kind of highlight the lightning that's coming off from the dragon. There was a couple of little spots where it was coming off, and I'm actually tossing a few extra little lines in there here and there of lightning. And then at one point I end up putting a little bit of shine on the globes, the balls that he's got in his hand, in order to just kind of give them a little bit more roundness to them. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed watching me color this. I ended up not pulling out my colored pencils because I really liked how it turned out with just the markers. Anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead and show you the final results. Here it is. I think it turned out really cool. I'm super happy with it. There's a couple of places that I absolutely love, like this arm on the dragon. I love the shadows on it. I think it looks really cool. And a lot of the shadows and shading in the mountains I think look really amazing. I'm super happy with how it turned out. I ended up having to redo the hair, as you saw and I probably talked about, and I ended up pulling some of the purple from the hair up into the clouds in order to make that purple make a little bit more sense. Overall, I'm super happy with how this turned out. Hopefully you enjoyed it. One last time, this is Mythic World by Kirby Rosanes. They have a number of coloring books that are absolutely beautiful to look through and a lot of fun to color. And in case you're wondering what the back of the page looks like that I colored, it does bleed through quite a bit. But I did also use the marker pretty heavily. I really saturated the paper. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to color in that page, but that's okay. That page is mostly just trees anyway, so it's not that big of a loss, and I ended up with a pretty cool looking piece on this side, so I'm pretty happy. I'm glad that I broke into this book and actually started working in it. Let me know if you guys have the same kind of fear that I do about starting to work in a coloring book like this, afraid that you're going to ruin it. I think it's kind of the same sort of thing as like the fear of the blank page in your sketchbooks. But I'm glad I actually broke into this and started coloring in it. Now I should be able to do more coloring in here without having to worry about ruining it, because I've already ruined one page because I'm not going to be able to work on the one page in there. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed watching, and if you did, please give it a like, think about subscribing, and I will see you later. Bye.